All right, guess we can probably kick it off. No worries, Eve. Okay, so I think we'll kick it off from there. Anyone else that comes in late, they can watch the recording if they need a good nap. Otherwise, good to go. So obviously, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today, Holistic Analytics is going to take you through our Customer Analytics webinar. It's part of our webinar series. Originally, we had 3 webinars planned. Now we're at 4. It looks like this thing will keep going for longer and longer. So if people want to keep doing these, we'll keep going with some extra webinars for them. Today, the focus is on customer analytics. Basically, what we'll talk about is where customer analytics has come from, where it's going to, how we get more data, and how we actually use it better. So it should be pretty easy. These are some of the questions that we've been asked so far. So what are the top benefits of investing in customer analytics? It's more money, more customers, better long-term success, can be better customer experience. Whatever your major metric is you use as an organization, you can help improve it basically with customer analytics. What approach do you use to monetize customer data? We'll go through first, second, and third-party data later on, so we'll cover that one there. How is this different than marketing analytics? We'll cover that in the next slide. What is the secret to the perfect 4-cheese toasty? It's a great question. So I'm just going to post that one in the comments in case anyone actually wants that. One person did ask. And also, for those of you that do have any questions as we go through, we've just posted in the comments there, quick, easy ways for you to ask questions. No, I just posted the 4-cheese recipe twice. Sorry about that. For anyone that does have questions, we've just posted in the comments there the easiest way to go about that. So just write down that you actually have a question, and when we come to the question section, we've got 2 of them, we'll work back to you. How hard is this to start? It can be really, really simple to start. In terms of tools, there's millions that you can use. We'll go through that as well. So jumping into it, if those that came to the first webinar or watched it online, they'll have seen this little slide before. First week, we talked about marketing analytics, which is getting people into the funnel. This week, we're going to focus on customer analytics, which helps maximize what is in the funnel. And then next week, we're talking about holistic analytics, which is how you can get the rest of the business to work better together in order to solve these kind of problems. As we can see here, customer analytics has probably the most automated tools of any branch of analytics at the moment. It's also where the most confusion exists for most businesses. There are millions of things people can do in this area. Working out what they need to do, what they should be doing, and how they can do it is one of the biggest challenges. As we see here, this can be the most confusing area for a business to properly capitalize on. So when we're going through this today and what you should be doing when you're looking at customer analytics as a business going forward, it's imperative to look at actual behavior, not claimed behavior, and we'll talk through that a little bit more later on, and to ensure that your culture have a culture based on test and learn. So if you get a new tool, a new metric, a new anything, it's really important that you actually test that, measure that, and understand how all that helps drive whatever metric you're using. There's 1,000 different things you can measure, not all of them are going to be useful. So understanding what you have and how you're using it is vital to a business. Once you start doing these things, you can develop metrics and tool sets and help improve the business from there. So understanding your customer. Traditionally, some of the things we would ask customers that we felt were very valuable, what their name is, how old are they, where do they live. From a marketing perspective, these have always been really popular. From a media perspective as well. Their age allows them to break it down to demographics. So if they're trying to target a certain TV program, a certain publication, whatever the case is, it's made it a lot easier for them. Where do they live has been perfect for out of home, great for contextual messaging through digital as well. What's their name? The dream of media for a long time has been one-to-one personalization. So if you know a person's name, obviously you can make it feel a bit more personalized, or as generally happens, just creepy as hell. When somebody messages you, has your name and your details, and you've got no idea who they are. Where we're moving to, though, is this more of a digital world, or what the digital world enables. How do we know when a customer is committed to a product? How do we know when they want your product rather than your competitors? And what's their likelihood to purchase a set amount? Obviously, there's thousands more things we can understand about a customer. These are just indications of, through the use of digital and other signals, the kind of information that we can actually get about a customer now, and that we can make a lot more value out of. A really important thing to do with customer analytics as well is to look to failures. I always assume everyone knows this story, but I hang out with strange people. In World War II, the Royal Air Force, or the British Air Force, looked at a bunch of their planes that had landed, a bunch of the bombers, and they started looking at the bullet holes. They did this to try and understand what parts of the planes needed to be reinforced. And so they were looking where the most bullet holes were, and then they were planning to reinforce that until a statistician came in and told them they were looking at the wrong thing. They actually need to look at the planes that didn't come home. So of those planes that had come home, where weren't the bullet holes? With the suggestion being that any plane that had been shot in the places where there weren't bullet holes didn't return. So those were the areas that you needed to improve the armor on. In customer analytics, you need to do the exact same. You can't just look at when your customers are improving or when you're getting sales from a customer. You need to also look at when your customers are leaving. This can be before they're in your funnel, if they're on your website, what point are they dropping out? If they're trying to fill in a form, at what point are they dropping out? When does it become too much effort for them? One of the major industries for this is actually donations. If you're a charity, the stat I saw recently was 80% of people that plan to donate and actually make it to a donation page, 80% drop out on the donation page because there's too many details and too much information they need to give in order to complete that donation. So you've made the effort too big and those people are dropping out. Research has been a really popular way historically of understanding your customer. If you're launching a new product or if you're trying to get a better view of people that aren't in your funnel, research can be a beautiful way to do this. It can also be a great way of understanding how customers are behaving in your funnel. The major issue with a lot of research, though, is that it's actually focused on intent. And what I mean by this is it's what people say they're going to do, not what they actually do. So, for instance, while in lockdown, my intent is to eat healthily. But I also know I have the ingredients I need to make chocolate-covered honeycomb with no baking soda. And 100% that's going to happen. So despite what my claimed intent may be, the reality is going to be different. Mitchell actually asked a really good question in our last webinar around NPS, and he brought up that study done by Bain & Co. suggesting that it was the major driver for long-term success of a business. I thought that was quite interesting, so I actually looked into that study. I was confused why Bain & Co. would do a study like that in the first place. One of the major reasons was they were one of the people that created NPS. So this was one of their major metrics. So this was kind of like them rating themselves. There's been a bunch of other studies that have come out since then suggesting that customer satisfaction is actually a stronger driver of long-term success. Customer experience is a better driver of long-term success. But if you pull back and take a look at all of them, all they're saying is that businesses that focus on customers have better long-term success. NPS is also used alongside now or replaced by RAP, which is recommendation and purchase. So it's looking, rather than the intent that NPS looks at, it's looking at the actual behavior those people have exhibited. So all these metrics can be used really, really well, can be of great value. It just depends, again, you have to use it properly, you have to test and learn and make sure it's having an impact on your business, not just what your board has told you. Okay, so traditionally, these are a lot of the ways customer information was captured through order forms, inquiries, complaints, warranty cards, customer reward program, satisfaction surveys, feedback cards, etc., etc. You would have been served millions of these and probably served a range of these yourselves. They're good for getting demographic information really well. They're not so good at getting any behavioral or other information that you can act on. So again, for a media agency, these can be really useful. They can help you target certain types of media. From a customer target perspective, you are most likely going to be segmenting groups in the wrong way if all you're using is these kind of inputs. Obviously, we got you all to fill in a little survey before you registered for this. These are the outputs of that. At the moment, this is just customer data. There's no customer analytics run over top of this. We can have a look here and say, all right, we've got a few people in media, which is more representative of where we've come from. We could pitch our presentation more directly to those people, but then you'd risk isolating others. A few of you have put other but obviously we looked back at the email addresses and were able to tie that through to an industry as well. So it's just giving some more information about the information people give you. Always requires a bit more research or time spent on it to actually get what you want from it. Beautiful. So obviously we've gone through that first section really quickly. What we might do now is just stop and see if we have any questions. I put this little chart on here to help try and drive some of those questions forward, possibly. This chart was produced by the CBA just this week. It's looking at differences in percentage spend from this year compared to last year. So you can see that in-store spends peaked and have started to drop, but also even though people are self-isolating, online spends have completely plummeted in the last month. So I thought this probably went against what most people would initially think, what their gut feel would be. So if people have any questions or comments, just speak up in the chat there and we'll throw to you. Or if not, we can keep going forward.
I guess we can keep going forward. Taz, I heard your mic get a little bit weird there. Can you give a test real quick?
Yeah, working better now?
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to put over to the side for everyone in the chat a series of topics here in the chat right now. So we're looking at, as we go through this content, we're going to do a little more customer analytics, obviously a little more use case examples, and a little bit more about different solutions within customer analytics now. As we go through that, and as anyone thinks about their business or thinks about maybe how to apply that in the current time frame they're in, we have some more teasers over here in the chat about some things that we can do additionally towards the end of this presentation in terms of questions, but also maybe for potential additional webinars we can do in the future.
So we just got a question from Ryan there. What did we determine was the cause of this decline in online? CBA didn't produce enough information for that, but a couple of the reasons, we did a bit of digging into it. One was the fact they cut all their pricing. So online stores, retail stores especially, just slash their pricing. And being that this is looking at revenue rather than profit or items sold, that was part of the reason that dropped. Another reason that was quite interesting was trust. So in terms of trust, people didn't have the same trust or the same tangibility you get from online. In terms of panic buying, people wanted it in their hands right then. They wanted to know that they were going to get it. And it seems that even though there's been a lot of growth in the online space, people don't have that trust that if they order it, they'll get it when they want it, or they'll get it straight away. So how companies can bridge that gap between not having something and having something, like the tangibility aspect, will be something that every online company will need to focus on going forward, I think. And yeah, Ray, I wonder what the Courier's Aussie Post are reporting. It's a great question. I know Australia Post actually started slashing some of their staff around coronavirus, which I thought was absolutely bizarre. They have the opportunity to position themselves really strongly here as a leader in this area, especially when it comes to these kind of things. But I assume they're suffering from those same issues with online spend being down.
It has a couple of slides ago, you had these 5 pictures, like the NPS, RAP, customer experience, and customer journey. I always viewed NPS and RAP as a way of measuring customer satisfaction. Is there any other way you recommend measuring customer satisfaction?
So there's a range of tools you can use for customer satisfaction. One of the biggest issues with, I think, modern companies using NPS is they're putting it at the wrong places. A lot of the times it'll just be after they've dealt with the call center or they've dealt with a complaint or something else, and that's when they're asking you what your satisfaction levels are. There's customer satisfaction surveys. There's brand recommender surveys as well. So you've got brand perception and brand recommender. that you can just do out and do large qual and quant surveys on. There's a range of ways to measure satisfaction. The beauty of RAP is it doesn't require people reporting how satisfied they are. It's based on the metrics. So it's looking at whether or not those people have physically recommended, not whether or not they've reported that they're recommending it, but also it's looking at their purchases. So somebody can say, I don't like you, but they're still purchasing your item 20 times a week and recommending you to 3 of their friends. Maybe they do like you. Maybe they're just trying to get something out of you by saying that. So it's trying to go beyond, I guess, those more personal or possibly selfish reasons that people are looking at and into their actual behavior to understand, which is what you want to be driving in the end anyway.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right, jumping through again. One of the major things companies need to look at the moment is how they can actually capture more customer information. Loyalty programs are doing a good job of this. A lot of you probably have a Woolworths rewards card or 1,000 different cards from 1,000 different coffee shops. If they don't have your name on them, the coffee shops probably aren't doing a great job of capturing your information. But most loyalty programs are really well set up to capture information. And if the company's doing it properly, they can tie that information through to their online. So through to when you're on the website, they know when you're there, they know what you're looking at. I can think of 3 companies I've seen that do that, which is really, really unfortunate. It's a huge opportunity for companies that they're just missing at the moment. Transaction data is another really useful one at the moment. Whether or not you can use that and how you can use that is going to change a bit with GDPR and the other regulations coming through. But if you have somebody's credit card data, you know where they're shopping, you know what they've been looking at, you know if they're making an online purchase to an offline purchase. And that kind of information can be really useful when you're trying to tie offline to online data as well. This is, I think, the biggest wall or the biggest gap that most companies have at the moment. They have some really valuable offline information and they're not using it with their online whatsoever. We've got a use case later on where we'll talk through that. But if you can tie a customer from your CRM, from your loyalty program, back to your website, you know how often they're visiting you, you know what they're researching. So you've got more than just a purchase. And from there, you know how you can target them better, how you can move them to different things, but also how you can target them with digital advertising, which should be quicker, cheaper, easier. I say should because it's not always the case. And this is what we were talking about there. How do we combine that data from offline to online? And yeah, I'll cover that in just a second, Ray. So combining data offline to online, you need to, obviously with your offline data, you generally have your CRM data. Even if this is purchased or captured from an online purchase, it will generally go into your offline CRM. The challenge here for a lot of companies is finding links across the data. So if you have an offline CRM, it's how do you tie that to an online person? If they've logged into your website, it's really easy, as long as you have a single ID that you're passing back and forth through there. If not, you might be able to tie their cookie ID through to their credit card. There's a range of touch points that you can pick up that can help you to combine your online and offline data. It's just working out which of those touch points are valuable for you. At the moment, there's something called fingerprinting you can do digitally, which doesn't use your cookie. It looks at a few other data points that can be captured online about you. And I think the number is 4 of those data points can give you 97% of the population. So you can identify on an individual basis who 97% of the population are shopping on your site just by what you've got on your phone, on your browser, whatever the case is, that most companies currently have access to. And that will change going forward. So external data, to Ray's point here. Yeah. So there's 3 major types of external data, and then there's actual external data. I'll explain what I mean there. The first 3 parts here are external data about you specifically. So your first-party data, just trying to explain that for you. If somebody's on your website, any information you capture about them there is first-party data. That will be captured through a first-party cookie, and first-party cookies are still going to be used going forward. This is how companies can help personalize your experience on your website. So if you click through something, they'll know where you've clicked through, what you've looked at, and be able to serve that to you in the future a lot easier. Second-party data is just your first-party data on somebody else's website. So if you went to my competitor's website and then I purchased that information from them, that would be second-party data I'd be using. That's still going to be completely legal going forward as well, and will be one of the bases for tying together data in the future. Third-party data has been the focus for a whole bunch of companies recently. This has been on third-party cookies, and with GDPR compliance coming through, as well as CCPA, which is California's, PDPA, which is Singapore and Malaysia, and ITP 2.0, which is largely driven by Apple hashing their data, third-party data and third-party cookies will be disappearing. When we talk about a third-party cookie, this is a cookie that can trace you across the web. So if you go to I was going to say a porn site, but that's probably a bad example. If you go to a news site, that news publisher can track you then from there onto, say, a car site. So if Holden was advertising on news.com, they would know that customers have come from news.com onto Holden. And then news.com could also tell them they've gone to Ford, they've gone to Audi, they've gone to a bunch of others, and then they've gone to buy a bicycle. So third-party cookie data can trace people through a range of different websites, and that is being removed by Google in the next year or two, which will cause a lot of companies to go to bust. The way a lot of companies are looking at getting around that in the future is they'll be purchasing second-party data from other companies and trying to stitch all that together. One solution is to create APIs, so a direct connection between your server and another server, which just plugs it in so you know who their customers are. But there's going to need to be a lot of agreements between a lot of companies to make that happen. So the success on that's going to be a lot slower to start with. The other piece of external data here is actual external data, which Ray was talking about. So that's bringing in weather patterns, seasonality. It could be news, could be anything being spread on Facebook in large message groups, whatever the case is. All of this can be really valuable to understand your customer behavior. Once you've got customers segmented, you could actually use this kind of information to understand which bits of these inputs influence them. So if you're in a entertainment area and you're running an outdoor amusement park, you'll find the weather forecasts are actually far more of a valuable driver for you than actual weather. So if the forecast says on Saturday that it's going to be 18 and miserable, and Saturday turns out to be 26 and sunny, the fact it said it was going to be 18 and miserable is going to destroy your sales for the Saturday. So tying that together can be really useful to understand when your customers are going to be coming in, the kind of volume you're going to be getting for them, and how you can target them a bit better. How you use that data in terms of customer analytics, it's often more large party rather than individual. So a lot of customer analytics is focused on the individual. How do you talk to them properly? How do you separate them and target them properly? A lot of that external data, although it can be used on an individual basis, is much more valuable from a large group basis. That makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to run through a few of the classic solutions that currently exist. Customer lifetime value, which I've just tied together here with recency, frequency, and monetary value. There's probably 1,000 different programs that can calculate CLV for you or RFM for you. How accurate they are isn't particularly great most of the time. The problem with each of these is, as a metric by themselves, they're not particularly useful. Same with most metrics. These become really valuable when you actually tie them together with other things. So with CLV, you'd use that to segment your customers. If you have customers who are going to be there and they're going to drop in really quickly, they're going to buy one thing and they're never going to come back, you need to market differently to those people than customers that are going to be with you for the rest of their life. So using this to segment, create an audience, and then push that back onto lookalikes can be really valuable. Same with RFM, but just getting a CLV score or an RFM score by itself is largely pointless. Unless you're going to do something with the metric, there's no real value in you having that metric. Segmentation, very similar thing. So we've got 3 areas here that are all in blue and one that's in white. Demographics being the classic type of segmentation and the one you'd all probably know the best. Demographics based on your age, could be your ethnicity, could be your name, the kind of job you have. Demographics being the classic usage of segmentation that's existed for years. If you're purchasing TV at the moment, you're purchasing it on demographics most of the time. Psychographics, another way to go, and you could argue that you're purchasing your TV programs based on the psychographic. This is based on conscious and subconscious thoughts. So this is where you'd be trying to target people that love Tiger King, the kind of people that are attracted to shows like that, and people that have lives, although I guess everyone at the moment doesn't, so that's fine. Geographic is where you live, based on the areas you kind of populate, where you go, the kind of things you do. And behavioral, which is the reason we've got it in white here, is, again, probably the most underused version of segmentation at the moment, but probably the most useful. With behavioral segmentation, you can understand what the purchase cycle is for that person, where they're going to come to your site, what they're going to be looking at, how you can move them through your site, what kind of triggers are going to work best for them, what kind of terms are going to work best for that kind of group. This is where your creative can really come into play, where your copywriting can really come into play as well, but also just the buttons and the options you have on your website. So a lot of the times, websites will be based around demographic targeting, or products will be based around demographic targeting, whereas in the future, with what you can get from digital, most of that should change to behavioral targeting. There's a lot more value in that from a dollar perspective than just trying to group everybody from Durack into the same bucket. Churn, this is where we look at our failures. So churn's really, really valuable for most companies to understand. There's a range of types of churn and a range of ways you can look at it. Pre-commitment versus post-commitment. Pre-commitment's when a customer is on your website, but they haven't purchased yet. So from a pre-commitment perspective, somebody like a super company will spend a lot of time trying to attract people, getting them to fill out a form, and then hoping that they, even once they've committed, hoping that they put money into the super. If somebody drops out before they've actually gotten onto the super there, then that's a pre-commitment churn. Post-commitment churn is if you have more regular sales, or even in the super company again, if they've been with you a while and they leave, you're looking to understand what the drivers of that churn are. For somebody like health insurance, I know April and June have become massive churn periods. This kind of goes to Ray's segmentation piece there, seasonal piece there, because that's when rate changes come through, that's when everyone starts looking for a new provider. Another really important type of churn at the moment is voluntary versus involuntary. What we mean by this is somebody that's left your company not because they want to, but because they couldn't pay most of the time, or they could no longer afford it, or they no longer like the service. You need to separate out these types of churn. Firstly, it can help you attract only the kind of customers that will be voluntary churn going forward. Obviously, attracting a customer is really expensive, and so improving how you do that's really effective. But in times like this, understanding whether a churn is involuntary or they've gone somewhere else can help your company in the future. So a lot of people are obviously had their wages cut, had their jobs cut at the moment. And so if you understand those that left you for those reasons, A, there's something you can potentially do from a customer experience perspective to help keep them on, reduce their fees, whatever the case is. But B, you understand it's not your service that's making them leave. It's just not a vital service for them right now. So you can help change the way you're dealing with your customers by understanding that. Another really important aspect of churn is the drop-off points. If you've got a form people have to fill in to join you, or if there's a long sales cycle, understanding at what point people are dropping off is really, really valuable. If you've got a form with 30 questions and everyone drops off at question 5, you need to go back and look at question 5 and see why they're dropping off there. See if you can remove it, reword it, change it, whatever the case is. And another very useful thing of looking at churn here is common complaints. If somebody's leaving, understand why they've left. Look at the complaints they have and try and gather all those together. If you have a range of people leaving for the same reason, that's something you need to fix. It's all fairly common sense, but through analytics, actually tying that together can become really, really valuable. Another really valuable piece in the last tool we're looking at here is customer journey. Traditionally, this was done through surveys, through shop-alongs, through interviews. Apparently, some people still do digital shop-alongs where you share a screen with somebody and they just follow you as you click through your websites for the day. Sounds terrible to me, but each to their own. The most valuable one of these that we have in the digital age now is through customer usage data. With this, you can understand the full customer journey that people are going on. With third-party cookies, you can understand before they've gotten to your site what they've been doing. But even with first-party cookies, you can understand where they're going on your site, what they're looking at. And using this data and this customer journey, you can help segment that customer really quickly. Once you've done that, you know what kind of product they're interested in, you know how to target them, you know what stage of their purchasing journey they're in. So a lot of the time it'll be if they've made 6 actions. So it could be they've spent 4 minutes on your website, they've clicked through 3 different pages, they've requested a brochure. If they've committed those 3 actions, then they're going to go through to the next phase. So they're now more committed than the other group, and you'll talk to them differently, you'll offer them differently, and you'll move them through those phases. This helps reduce your churn or your pre-commitment churn and helps increase your revenue through the time. So to bring all this together, we've got a use case here. In this use case, a customer has launched an e-com store or a range of e-com stores recently. Majority of their customers are still coming through their physical stores. So they've currently got 10 different websites, 10 different CRMs, 10 different loyalty programs, and they're a publicly listed company. As part of their public listing, they claim they have X million of people in their customer loyalty programs. So potentially straight away, they're facing misreporting of those loyalty program numbers, as chances are there's double ups between them. In creating these companies, or in creating these brands, they've done research by each brand, and they've created their brand for a different demographic and psychosocial group. So this could be young people that are really active. It could be older people that like to walk and want comfortable shoes. It could be hiking people. But they've decided that each of these brands are entirely separate. Each of these segments are entirely separate people, which just is generally patently untrue. So the first thing you need to fix is understanding how that research differs from the actual. In order to do this, what we do is you look at combining the data across CRMs. Thankfully, with a CRM, you'll generally have the person's name. Names can be a terrible way to combine data. They're generally manually entered, so misspelling is a really, really big problem. So instead of looking at names, often you'll look at mobile numbers, email addresses, and home addresses. You'll want a few different things you can combine together, and using fuzzy logic, you can actually identify each of the individuals in those CRMs. Once you've combined the data across these CRMs and able to determine who is who, you create a single customer ID. So with each brand having its own CRM, most of the times these are brands that the company has acquired, so they won't have the same CRM. One of them might be on Salesforce, one of them might be on Oracle, one might be on Siebel, a couple might have just made their own CRMs themselves. So most of the times those brands will want to keep using their own CRM. So when you create this single customer ID, you do it in what we call an active data layer. So a layer of information that sits on top. It's completely non-disruptive. It just pulls all the information together that you require at the time. And to do that, once you pull it together, you create a single customer ID, which you feed back into all of those CRMs. So every time you run any analysis, you need to use that to enrich whatever other source you have. So using that single customer ID, you can now give every one of those CRMs that unique ID. From there, you can count exactly how many people you have. So you know exactly the amount of people you have in your loyalty program with no duplicates. Once we've done that, you can roll out the customer ID to any online interaction. So if they've logged into any of their loyalty programs while on any website, or if it's just got them tagged whenever they're on that website, you can give that single customer ID to that person. You know that person has been on that website. This becomes really valuable for a brand group like this because you can then track that customer across all of your brands. You know when they're shopping in one brand, you know what kind of shoes they're looking at. And by combining that data across the websites, you can understand when they're in market, how much they're willing to spend, and whether or not what they're looking at is the best thing you want them to be looking at. So they may be looking at a pair of runners that are $100, but you know that generally their budget's $250. And you have a pair of shoes you know they'd be interested in another brand. So you can actually send them targeted advertising for that brand at that spend and able to bring them across. If you can combine all of this information together, you can understand your behavioral spend habits, you can understand when customers remarket, what their pricings are, how to offer them things better, how to approach them. You get this really rich tapestry of information for customers. And if you're a large brand group like that, or if you imagine you're somebody like Wesfarmers, if you can combine your customer information across all of your websites, you become one of the single largest holders of first-party data in Australia. And if you use that information, you can then sell that to other companies, obviously anonymized or grouped up, and you've got an entirely new revenue stream. So there's huge value in doing this from a personal perspective for your business. But once you capture all that information, there's a whole range of ways that you can actually monetize that and build that out for other companies, creating new revenue streams without extra effort for you. And obviously there's some GDPR compliance issues around that, but there's a range of ways to go through that. Where to from customer analytics? Again, everything you look at in customer analytics, every time you build out a segment, a group of people, understand their behavior, you can feed all of that back into your marketing. So one way to improve it is to change your marketing, change the people you're targeting, and improve your marketing mix that way. The other mix is once you have customers, once they've purchased something, if you notice they're churning, chances are it's not because of your website or post-commitment. It's not because of your website or because of your marketing. It's because of the product or some other experience they've had with your company. So if you use holistic analytics where you're tying information across the rest of your business, you can actually understand what touch point was driving them away, what part of the purchase they didn't like, what experience it was they didn't like, and then you can tie this back into customer analytics and optimize the entire chain. So we can stop there again. There's our last one. So any major questions on that? Obviously, we've gone through it quite quickly. But just put in a message there and feel free to ask anything you like. And also, we've still got that survey in the chat there. So if you have anything you'd like to see in a future webinar, just feel free to respond to that in the chat.
Hey, Das, you mentioned the 4 types of segmentation data, like the demographic, psychographic, geographic, and behavioral. One of the clients I came up with the digital. In other words, they were segmenting customers based on are the customers using desktops to do the research or tablets, what kind of browser. I was wondering if you have come across something like that.
Yeah, a lot of media agencies are using that kind of information as well now. I'd probably tie that into your behavioral almost. It's another way to break people down, but mostly it's used for 2 things. One, how you set up your website and whether or not you need to have a look into optimizing it for mobile phones or for tablets or for other things. But the other thing is how they can target those. So there's different media options or marketing options for a tablet or for a mobile phone compared to your laptop or your desktop. So it's just using those ways to target people for better marketing messaging, not generally for their actual behavioral changes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we've had clients utilize fingerprint data before, Dusanka. It works by combining a range of things. So if you're looking at your first-party cookie data, you can see the kind of information that you're getting on there. It can be IP data. It could have region. It might have your age if you're looking at your Google Analytics stack. There'll be a few pieces of information there, and you can tie all those together. The challenge with fingerprinting going forward will be that ITP 2.0, where companies like Apple are beginning to hash some of that data. So with third-party cookies disappearing, that data that we normally use for fingerprinting will be disappearing at the same time. So how you can improve that becomes more of a challenge.
Cool, thanks.
No worries. Ray would like to dive further into behavioral. What would you like to talk about there, Ray?
Sorry, I meant for the future sessions, not necessarily right now, but you've just mentioned that it was probably one of the least sort of touched on aspects of the four, and I was kind of seeking maybe some illustrative examples at some point, not necessarily now.
Yeah, not a problem. We can put something together for you. We'll cover that.
I want to throw in on some of that fingerprinting stuff. You know, there are multiple techniques. And there are multiple techniques to ensure privacy and all that sort of stuff, tying multiple, data sets down from various third parties. There's, but, it's a technology discussion kind of, and I sort of didn't want to throw too much in there. But we've, in the past, where Taz and I have worked together, we've managed to join data sets together, assuring complete privacy of the individual and all that sort of stuff, which is of paramount importance to me. There's multiple techniques, fingerprinting and others.
Fingerprinting was probably just one of the more common ones at the moment, but I think that'll probably fall away soon. And as you're saying, other techniques will be put to use. In terms of behavioral, just to touch on it briefly, one of the reasons it's not heavily used at the moment is it's really hard to tie back to marketing. So from a media and marketing perspective, how you target a behavioral group as opposed to a demographic group is a real challenge. I can't think of any website or publisher that's set up for behavioral segments. If any publisher manages to work that out, there's a huge bucket of money sitting there for them. Any other questions there? Audio data collection. So in terms of recording things on a phone call or...
Here, I'll just jump in there. Just when you're talking to people and you say, like you mentioned Audi, for instance, and then all of a sudden it feels like you're getting Audi advertisements on your phone or your news feed the next minute. Is that what's going on with that? Nobody ever seems to talk about that, but that seems quite invasive. Or is that just a coincidence? Yeah,
there's a lot of articles and claims that none of that's being recorded or tracked or anything else. There's definitely a lot of ways apps can get access to a microphone and get access to other things, so they can target in that particular way. What's being done there is it's almost neuro-linguistic programming. So what you do is you get an audio program that tracks or records everything that happens. From there, you translate that into text for the machines. The machines then pore over that text looking for keywords. Those keywords would belong to advertisers that have opted into that scheme, and then those keywords would be targeted back to whatever device that was recorded on. There you go.
All right, thank you for that.
Thanks, Ray. Google, Amazon, Azure all have APIs for that exact kind of information.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's a range of invasive techniques that are used at the moment. A lot of shopping malls have started to use your mobile phones to track you. So obviously, Wi-Fi has been the traditional way to track people through all their mobile cell towers. Some people have put in some things in the mobile phone, so it tracks your mobile phone specifically. And I think it can get you within half a meter or a meter of where you've been. So we can track exactly where you've been in the store, what you've looked at, and exactly how you're moving through there. To Mitchell's got a question there. Do you expect widespread adoption of the customer ID concept? Does appear to be one of the better ways forward for traditional businesses burdened with complex and usually disconnected legacy systems. Yeah, in a perfect world, Mitchell, the single customer ID is what everyone will be doing. A lot of companies, don't realize they can do that, which blows my mind every time. We've talked to some companies and they just never thought of combining their information across their brands. It will become a little bit more difficult in the future. Traditionally with GA360 or Adobe, you'll be able to combine separate websites into the one analytics stack. With removal of third-party cookies, you can't do that in the future. They'll have to be on a single domain. So how you go about doing that will become more difficult, especially if you're looking at online data. But it's absolutely one of the best ways a company can get more information about their customers, remove some of that complexity, and remove some of those issues around legacy systems. The reason this may not happen is because sales and marketing teams are really strong for tech solutions that are focused around this being an issue for them, rather than creating a solution for this. So somebody like Salesforce may not want people combining all that information really quickly and easily like that.
From competitor systems?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. They prefer to be the one-stop shop for everything, and if they're not, they don't want to make it easy to bring in other information from other systems.
Sure. But yeah, it is one of the obvious logical ways forward. And you're right, so many people would see it as instantly too complex, too hard. We'll try some other short-term option.
Absolutely, and that's the next webinar we're talking about is holistic analytics, and the whole focus of holistic analytics is combining data across your organization from different systems to provide that much clearer, much easier picture. So from a customer analytics perspective, it's really simple, combining information across CRMs and websites. From a larger organizational perspective, it could be combining information from your sales team to your marketing team to your production team to your finance team to your accounting team, and then using those different pieces of information to drive business optimization. And yes, we can, Ray. Going forward, not a problem. Any other major questions there, Michael?
I was going to make a comment just to Mitchell's question there about combining on the systems. I think, Mitchell, the procedural way to do it, I think, as we try to highlight, is the active data layer allows us to very easily, in a non-destructive way, do that. So we'd find the actual problem that we can get the most momentum from the stakeholders to solve, connect those bits of data first, and prove value, and then move out from there, which is a little bit in opposition to trying to do it all at once. I think that's the technique now that we feel is the best way to get the ball rolling. Yeah,
a lot of the pushback from that kind of solution in the future has been that it's a 3-4 year piece. So if you're rolling out a live CRM, it could take you 5 years. But if you're doing it with this active data layer, you can do it in 3 months. It's much simpler.
And you've seen that happen in 3 months? Deliver real value?
Yep.
Sure, great.
The whole reason you can do it in 3 months is you're not trying to boil the ocean.
Yes.
So if you're trying to make a data lake and pull everything into it, that can take a long, long time.
Indeed.
Pulling the information you know you need from the sources in such a way that you can use it straight away, you can get quick, really, really quick time value.
Agreed. Thank you.
No problem. Any other major questions there from anybody? If you don't have any other questions, feel free to put in your response there to Michael's survey. We can repost it here.
I was just going to make a quick note before we hang up. If anyone, well, I guess to kind of maybe summarize this, customer analytics is a very big space. So, and your customers are obviously very unique to your business. So this is a great presentation from Taz, highlighting kind of a good way to think, but you may be difficult to necessarily apply to your customers. I'm a big firm believer in chatting on the phone, brainstorming. So if anyone wants to hit us up for a 20-minute phone call to maybe try to take a little bit of this into your world right now, let us know. Be happy to do it.
If not, thanks for your time, guys.